the city's tree ordinance. The city of Belmont adopted its first tree ordinance in 2009. This ordinance focused on tree preservation within the proposed low-density residential development. These regulations, coupled with the landscape ordinance, was intended not only to preserve tree canopy during the development, but also assist in replacing lost canopy. Since the implementation of the ordinance, the city has continued to experience much growth and development. This growth has allowed us time to examine and evaluate our regulations to see if they met our anticipated results. During the same growth period, we have also heard growing concerns from our residents about the loss of tree canopy within the city. Working with the city's Environmental Sustainability Board, this issue was brought before the City Council in a workshop in early 2019, where staff shared information and our thoughts on how the ordinance could be strengthened. City Council then provided direction to move forward on the update. The timing of their direction was perfect in that the city was eligible to apply for a North Carolina Urban and Community Forest Grant. The city applied for the grant and was awarded monies to help develop this proposed update. The city initiated the project by creating a team to help guide us through the process. We started by hiring Davie Resource Group. They are leaders in the world of preservation and growth of urban forests. We established a steering committee compiled of community volunteers with diverse backgrounds and interests in tree preservation and development. We utilize our members of the Environmental Sustainability Board as well as the city's Planning and Zoning Board. We officially kicked off the project in November of 2019. The draft ordinance that will be presented this evening is the result of work done over the past 9 months in the area of research, stakeholder input, multiple meetings and site visits, as well as a community survey. I will now turn over the presentation to my co-presenter, Joe Joyner, to continue this presentation. Joe?
Hey, Shelley, thank you very much. And good evening and welcome to all of you out there who made time this evening to join in the conversation regarding your city's tree protection and landscaping ordinance. And to reiterate on Shelley, please be sure to submit any questions you may have via the app or text. And I also encourage everyone to take a look at the website, which contains links to the draft of the ordinance. So check it out and submit any additional questions you may have during the comment period over the next couple of weeks. So a brief background on myself. My name is Joe Joyner. I am a certified arborist and urban forestry consultant with Davie Resource Group, commonly known as DRG. Unfortunately, my colleague, Carrie Gray, is unable to make it this evening, but she has been there at every step along the way in the ordinance update process. DRG is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Davie Tree Expert Company, which was established in 1880. We consider ourselves a leader in arboricultural and horticultural consulting. Our urban forestry services help clients nationwide with the ability to manage their green infrastructure, both accurately and sustainably. To give you a little bit more background on me, I am NC born and bred. I earned my undergraduate degree from UNC Chapel Hill and a graduate degree from the University of Georgia in Athens. My career in the arboriculture industry spans the past decade and includes experience in the field, working on a crew, running tree care operations, sales and business development, and my current role, consulting. I joined DRG in the first half of 2018, working in the city of Baltimore, Maryland, on a team running a citywide street tree inventory. I spent the majority of 2018 and 2019 traveling around the country for various urban forestry projects, going as far west as California. And I've also had the honor of working with the Central Park Conservancy in New York City and the architect of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., where I can say that I've personally assessed almost every tree on the grounds of the Capitol building, the Supreme Court, and the congressional buildings. I'm currently based in Raleigh. I'm recently married and focused primarily on providing urban forestry consulting services to the Carolinas. It's been a pleasure over the last several months working with Shelley and her staff and getting to know the city of Belmont. I feel very positive about the modifications to the current ordinance, and I'm looking forward to your feedback. So with that said, I will start by recapping the process, how we got here, give a brief overview of the highlights of the current ordinance, and touch on the proposed changes and modifications. So my first meeting with Shelley and her team was back in November, December of 2019. We made introductions, laid out a tentative timeline, and set some broad goals, and talked big picture about how we thought the process should proceed. Since then, we've had many more meetings with Shelley and her planning staff, and the steering committee of the project, which is made up of a select group of volunteers. And I'd like to take a moment to say a big thank you to Sharon Johnston and Rob Wilhite from the Belmont Environmental Sustainability Board, Nick Vasili and Joe Liska from the Belmont Planning Board, Madeline Keeter with the Real Estate and Building Industry Coalition, David Fogarty from the Gaston County Cooperative Extension, and Steve Martineau from the City of Belmont Public Works. We also met with representatives of the planning department from other cities within North Carolina to get their thoughts and opinions on ordinances in general. And back in February of this year, we had a multi-day visit to the city of Belmont, which included focus group meetings with community stakeholders, which was a variety of stakeholders, including developers, representatives from McLean Development, Mr. Stephen Henshaw, representatives from the NCDOT, Mr. Ryan Barbie, and Duke Energy, Mr. Stephen Lord, and Belmont's own city engineer, Jerry Hatton. Current and prior members of the Environmental Sustainability Board joined in, including Marie Turner, Grace Nearing, and Brooke Hawks, Ms. Barrell with the Keep Belmont Beautiful, and members of the Belmont City Council, Martha Stowe, Richard Turner, and Jim Heffernan, and also the esteemed mayor himself, Mr. Charlie Martin. Out of the meetings and the research, there were many takeaways, and there seem to be four primary takeaways that came up often and amongst all of the various stakeholder groups, and these are on the screen in front of you. The emphasis and importance that the citizens of Belmont place on individual property rights, the unique development challenges of the city of Belmont, due as the city is the only community in North Carolina which is contained entirely within a riparian peninsula. As such, half of the city is considered legally protected watershed. And then you also have the historic district and other space constraints. So it is a unique challenge to develop within Belmont. We heard often about the shock of new development from people that have lived there, longtime citizens, and seemed as if some days that, their commute to work, they would look over and what had been a forest stand of trees was now empty as it was graded in preparation for new development. And as well as the outcomes of new development and landscaping just not meeting what the pre-development expectations, what we had in mind. So additionally, in late April, early May of this year, we worked with Shelley and the planning department to develop a community engagement survey targeted at Belmont's community stakeholders and designed to gauge their level of knowledge and interest as it relates to trees in general, public regulation of trees, and the city's current ordinance. It had 121 responses, and we found broad support for trees and the benefits trees provide, as well as for city protection and planting of trees. So 98% of respondents replied with trees are important to me, and 4 out of 5 respondents are in favor of some form of city regulation of tree protection and planting. So that is what we heard. And in addition to all of the meetings, we also did homework and research. Our on-site visit with the city included a review of existing and proposed site plans, a tour of the city, which included visits to 11 different locations within the city of Belmont. Additionally, we read the existing ordinance, Chapter 11, and we read the other relevant chapters, and then we read Chapter 11, and then we read the Belmont Vision for the Future, and then we read Chapter 11 again, and we read it again, and several more times after that. And what we found from our research aligned with and provided context for what we heard. So there were several key areas that we found to be requiring attention. One of which would be the language and formatting of the current ordinance lacked clarity, and this lack of clarity possibly contributed to outcomes not meeting expectations. The current ordinance also does not contain a mechanism for the planning department to know exactly what is on site in terms of trees and tree canopy prior to development. So this lack of information on pre-existing conditions is also a likely contributor of outcomes not meeting expectations. And the current tree save requirements, landscape requirements, and tree protection requirements during construction seem to be contributing, each in their own ways, to the shock of new development, outcomes not equaling expectations, and they also do not always seem to lend themselves toward accommodating the city's unique development challenges. Excuse me. Before discussing the proposed modifications, I first want to take a moment and highlight the main provisions of Belmont's current tree protection and landscaping ordinance. So there is a tree save requirement in the current ordinance, and the tree save requirement covers primarily low density residential developments. And there are also minimal requirements placed on higher density residential developments, primarily as those developments have specific types of what is deemed difficult topography, steep slopes and stream buffers. Low density residential are currently required to save 25% of the existing mature deciduous canopy on site. So, for example, a 100-acre development site, which is slated to be low-density residential, would be required to save 25% of the existing deciduous trees on site. So this amount can vary dramatically across different sites, as one site might have be mostly pine and not have any deciduous trees. Another site might have a lot of deciduous trees. And without a mechanism in place within the current code to quantify those trees in the canopy, ensuring compliance is difficult for both the developer and the city alike. And the current ordinance also has a stipulation on heritage trees. And heritage trees are considered to be any healthy deciduous tree larger than 12 inches. And low-density residential are required to save 25% of these heritage trees on site. And higher density residential are not required to save heritage trees. And a heritage tree is a deciduous tree larger than 12 inches. I'm not sure if I had mentioned that. So low-density residential are A, required to save 25% of their healthy, mature deciduous canopy, and B, 25% of heritage trees, which are deciduous trees 12 inches and larger. And higher density residential are required to save healthy, mature deciduous canopy trees in areas of difficult topography, but then are also not required to save any heritage tree, which is a deciduous tree. So this can be both confusing and to an extent contradictory. And so that is, again, one of the things that we wanted to look at as we consider that possibly contributing to some of the feedback that we heard during our research and review period. So, trying to click to the next slide here for you guys. There we go. So to an overview of our primary changes and modifications to the current ordinance. So we have expanded and updated the definitions with an eye toward improving clarity, from which should facilitate understanding and compliance. We have expanded existing tree save requirements to cover all types of new development. But even though we have expanded the tree save requirements to cover all types of new development, working with Shelley and her team, we've also identified particular types of development where compliance with the proposed changes and tree save and tree protection would be overly burdensome, particularly for individual property owners. So we have included some exemptions. Additionally, we have identified a clear process during the development plan review stage for the submission of the newly introduced required elements of the tree protection ordinance, again, in an effort to make things very plain and easy to understand and to help achieve understanding and compliance. And we have taken the landscaping section and made modifications which are designed to, once again, provide clarification and also with an eye to trying to achieve the mantra of putting the right tree in the right place. And that relates to the right tree in terms of species, making sure that the city of Belmont has species diversity to ensure longevity for the urban forest, and making sure that we look at the different types of development and put the right tree, different developments have different size lots, different building constraints. So we want to make sure that we're requiring the right trees to be put in the right place. And to go into a little bit more detail, we'll start with the definitions. So we have taken the definitions and moved them from the end of the chapter where they are in the current ordinance, and they are now in the beginning of the chapter. So this is in line with precedents with current ordinances out there, and is there often in the front of the chapter, and it is also, again, to help achieve clarity and make sure that anyone reading the ordinance is aware that the definitions are in there and you can't miss them. They're right there in front. And we've added new definitions, and new definitions both support the new language that has been added and new definitions to help define terms that may not have been defined in the existing ordinance. Additionally, existing definitions were modified and to ensure that these definitions aligned with current professional standards as the previous ordinance was produced a little over a decade ago. So one of the major changes or modifications that you'll see is, again, that we have expanded the tree save area requirement from low density residential to all types of development. And so the way tree save area is calculated and the application has changed. So low density residential development, just to recap, low density residential development currently stipulates 25% of existing mature deciduous canopy and 25% of on-site heritage trees shall be saved. So this can vary significantly from site to site and is difficult to enforce or ensure compliance without a mechanism in place in the current ordinance. So our update proposes a new system of calculating tree save. It is inclusive of all types of development, and it is also a tiered system that seeks to find a balance between requiring tree save and also the constraints specific to the various types of development that occur within a city. Our proposed ordinance introduces it's a credit-based system where the amount of required tree save, which we are calling TSA, acronym for tree save area. And so the amount of required TSA, tree save area, is a percentage of the gross site area of the site under development. So single family residential developments will have a tree save requirement equivalent to 20% of gross site area. And just as a easy concrete example, so a 100-acre site that is going to be single family residential will have to account for 20 acres of tree save area. Multifamily mixed use, which tend to be high density residential, high density residential falls within that category, have a 15% requirement, 10% for general commercial and industrial, and a 5% for historic downtown and Main Street area. So in addition to this tiered system, we introduce multiple methods to achieve compliance, and these methods include on-site methods and off-site methods. The preference is for the use of existing trees on-site to create tree save areas. However, we recognize that some sites might not have enough existing trees, and so on-site methods can include planting new trees, and it can also include using existing trees, buffers, potentially open space, planting new trees within open space areas in order to bring it up to standards. So there are multiple on-site methods, and other than saving existing trees, or should say to supplement the saving of existing trees on site. Additionally, again, we recognize constraints of various types of development. So there are also off-site methods included for satisfying the tree save area requirement. And this was identified as particularly important for the general commercial industrial development, as well as for the historic downtown Main Street area, where the space constraints could make it overly burdensome, if not impossible, to require on-site tree save. So, touch a little bit more on how the tree save area calculation is proposed to be changed. Again, I've mentioned that it was the required amount of tree save for new development is calculated as a percentage of the site area and will vary by type of development. Preference, use existing trees to meet the requirements. So the ordinance update proposes a tree inventory requirement, which will identify the trees on site that qualify for use in tree save areas. A qualifying tree will have to meet certain species, size, and health qualifications standards. And for this, we propose a 3-tier system of trees, and the type of tree will determine the amount of credit received for saving each tree. So protected tree, it has a diameter of 10 inches, and there are deciduous trees, which are hardwood trees, your oaks, maples. Significant trees can be either deciduous or conifer trees, 18 inches of diameter or larger. So this will include all the different types of pines, loblolly, slash pine, shortleaf. And then heritage trees are considered trees that are 36 inches in diameter and larger. And the inventory requirement stipulates that the inventory shall be completed by a qualified professional who can identify the species, size, location, and condition of health of each tree. And only healthy trees will qualify for credit. So I mentioned it's a credit-based system, and the amount of tree save area credit received is based on the size of the tree, and extra credit is going to be given for larger trees. And the reasoning and thought process behind providing additional credit for larger trees is to incentivize saving larger trees. And the reason you would like to incentivize saving larger trees is tied to the benefits that trees can provide. Research has shown that trees provide a myriad of benefits. They can remove pollution from the air, store carbon, reduce stormwater runoff, and the effects from flooding, which may be of particular importance in a town with rivers on either side. A city. Additionally, trees provide social, aesthetic, and health benefits to the community at large. And research has also shown that the quantity of benefits provided by trees increases relative to the size of the tree. So larger trees mean greater quantity of benefits. And we also feel that saving larger, healthier trees could help reduce the shock felt by the grading process when preparing for new development. So all of those things considered helped us create the tiered system provided that gives additional credit for the larger, healthy trees. And so another way in which we wanted to improve the clarity of the ordinance and to help those reading it understand exactly what we're asking for and when we're asking for it. So we try to focus on specifically identifying the elements of the process and when those elements should be introduced into the development plan review process. So the tree inventory, a newly required element, and the inventory will be required for submission during the sketch plan phase of the development plan review process. And again, the tree inventory will document the species, the size, the condition, or locations that will be performed by a qualified professional. And the planning department will have in front of them exactly the information that they need in order to help verify the tree save areas and help locate the best quality trees, which again might help reduce the shock felt from the process of development. The tree protection plan, which will delineate these proposed tree save areas, and the physical tree protection measures, which would include fencing and signage, is a required element of either the schematic plan or the construction plan, which depends on the type of development under consideration. And the tree planting plan is a newly required element where a site decides to go with an on-site method of meeting tree save, and that is not using just existing trees, but also planting new trees, or perhaps taking an existing natural resource buffer and planting within that, if it's allowable under the governing body of that particular natural resource buffer. Then there will be a tree planting plan. The tree planting plan will list out the species being planted, show the location, the sizes of installation, and show the calculations of how those newly installed trees relate to how much credit received for the tree save area. And so, again, to recap, there's new elements being introduced. Those elements receive their own section within the ordinance, and it the requirements of those elements are clearly laid out, as well as the timing of when those elements should be introduced. And so while we have decided to expand tree save area requirements for all types of development, we did recognize during the process that there are certain types of development which the requirements of the tree protection, the new tree protection provisions could be overly burdensome and might not even be necessary depending on type of development. So we identified this following list of types of development which are exempt from the tree protection requirements, and they are not exempt from the landscape requirements, but are exempt from the tree protection requirements. And these include exempt subdivisions, development plans seeking a change of use with no expansion, residential additions or upfits, non-residential expansion of existing buildings less than 25% of the existing building size, conventional rezones, development plans for residential infill, which is primarily new houses on existing lots, and then anything that is currently exempted by state law. So we wanted to make sure that all types of development were participating within the tree save area, but we've tiered the system relative to the types of development and tried to identify the types of development where tree save would be overly burdensome. And the modifications made to the landscaping portion are less extensive than the tree protection portion, but they're no less important. And the modifications primarily seek to clarify the wording of the provisions, specifically the types of landscaping buffers required for various types of development as it relates to the composition of species within those buffers, the widths of those buffers, and what buffers are required between different types of development. And we have made some tweaks and adjustments to various requirements, including the requirement for yard trees in residential areas and the requirement for street trees. And the modifications are designed to better align the ordinance with the mantra of the right tree in the right place, which seeks to avoid canopy overcrowding and seeks to promote long-term health of the urban forest. We've made some modifications that focus on promoting species diversity and focus on using species native to the area and native to the hardiness zone, so the climate of the city of Belmont. Again, we want to ensure that we are not putting, you see that picture there. We want to try and avoid situations where we put trees that are too large and too tight of a spot. That's one of the focuses that we looked at. We don't want a giant white oak tree to be right underneath power lines. So those situations. Additionally, we have clarified the maintenance responsibilities on trees, particularly street trees. So if the street tree can be maintained, the maintenance responsibility could be the city. It could be the individual property owner. It might be the homeowners association. It might be the commercial property management company. And it just depends on the location of the tree. And we have also sought to clarify the maintenance and safety standards and to bring those standards into alignment with current industry standards, which are the ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, ANSI A300 for tree care maintenance and tree care operations, and ANSI Z33 for safety standards. So we want to make sure that tree care maintenance is being done properly and also safely. And so With that, I think that's in a nutshell the large changes that we've made to the ordinance, or the modifications we're proposing to the ordinance, and I will hand off back to Shelley now. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe. As you can see, a lot of work has gone into the evaluation of the existing ordinance, trying to identify its weakness, and then the preparation of the ordinance update to strengthen the ordinance to provide a better tree canopy within Belmont for the future. Our next steps are, we are in the public engagement period, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear your public comments or questions, not just this evening, but within a public comment period that will extend for 2 weeks after tonight's event. We will provide a final review and present that to the steering committee. The state of North Carolina will also have to review the final draft to ensure compliance with their guidelines as it associates to the grant received. The draft ordinance will then be presented to the planning board for consideration and recommendation to Belmont City Council. They will consider the ordinance and ultimately make a decision on adoption. Now, either board may suggest changes to the final ordinance. After its adoption, the work doesn't stop there. That just starts our public education phase. That includes education of the development community. Now, to aid us in this effort, we will be working on a landscape and tree ordinance guide with illustrations to clearly identify our expectations for compliance. And we are now ready and on time to enter into our public question and comment period, question and answer period. And I am having trouble advancing my slide. However, I will bring the next slide up just to remind you of the website address, the code to enter your question or comment, or text us. And I may have to stop sharing briefly to bring up the correct slide. There we go. So again, we are looking forward to receiving your questions or comments. Please visit the website at the address shown on the screen, enter in event code 5119, or text message us at 805-303-5642. I want to remind you that the comment period after tonight's presentation will extend to the end of business day on September 2nd. You can email your questions directly to me at sdehart, SDEHART, at cityofbelmont.org. So with that, we will bring up our questions and start that process.
Limits, town boundaries, all trees within proximity to an urban area. And urban does not just have to mean like a like maybe like Charlotte or Raleigh type urban, but within incorporated limits is often how the term is used. Urban forests, sometimes people use the term to refer explicitly to the public trees of a particular city or township, so trees that are within the right-of-way or parks or public facilities. And oftentimes people use urban forests to be all of the trees, both public and private, within those town limits or city limits. So the best definition would be the trees, both public and private, located within the city of Belmont. So that would be the city of Belmont urban forest. All trees located within the within the city of Belmont.
Thank you, Joe. The next question I'll share is, will the proposed regulations impact my personal property rights and what I can do with trees on my residential lot?
Well, that is a good question, and it aligns with one of our 4 takeaways from all of the community stakeholder groups that we spoke with. And the proposed regulations do not, I'm generally speaking here because I'm not sure what your personal property looks like, but the proposed regulations should not impact your personal property rights in order of what you can do with the trees on your own property. So if you own a home right now with, say you've got like a 1 acre lot and you got a couple trees on your home there's nothing in these proposed ordinances that is going to tell you what you can or cannot do with those trees. And then again, if you say have perhaps own a vacant lot in town and you want to develop it, and that would be residential infill development. And so even though it is new development, you would qualify for the exemption that we mentioned. So what we've tried to do is design the ordinance to infringe as minimally as possible on your individual property rights.
Great. Next question. What happens if a tree in a tree save area dies? Will it have to be replaced?
The answer to that question depends on when the tree dies. So if the tree dies within, and I don't have the ordinance pulled up on my computer right in front of me, it would take me a second to flip through there, but I believe that if it dies within 2 years of the development of the property, then the answer is yes, it will have to be replaced. But if you have a tree in a tree save area and it's beyond that time frame that we have established within the proposed modifications, then there is no current stipulation in there requiring replacement. So trees do die of natural causes, and so but trees, the reason we put the 2 years in there is because that is generally the time frame that you will see from a tree dying from significant injury sustained during the development, construction, grading process. However, we have also designed our tree protection regulations to account for keeping the trees healthy. So there's the amount of area surrounding the tree required to be protected should prevent trees just dying from injury sustained during development. Again, we're focusing on trying to select healthy trees and then designing our tree save areas so that those trees survive. So yes, a tree will have to be replaced if it dies within 2 years, but we're designing these tree save areas to try and minimize any tree death from construction related activities.
Great, thank you. Next question. Which trees are protected and what determines which trees are protected?
So ultimately, trees that are protected are the trees that you're using in your tree save area. So there will be an established tree save area, and then any tree within that tree save area is going to be protected. So that tree should not be disturbed during development, etc. So, and using the word protection in terms of that, then any tree that ends up within an established tree save area is a protected tree. And now there are certain types of trees that qualify for tree save areas, and that's that 3-tier system, of which the lowest tier would be called quote unquote protected trees, and those are 10-inch diameter trees and up. And then also, but you are not required to save all trees that are 10 inches. You are not required to save all trees that are significant trees, which is the next tier, which is 18 inches. You just have to use those trees in order to create your tree save areas. Those are what qualify for tree save areas. Now, there is one category of tree which is considered a protected tree, and those would be heritage trees. So those are the trees that are 36 inches diameter and larger. And those trees, I mean, that diameter is very large size, and those trees are considered protected due to their, relative importance. A tree that size generally provides a lot of benefits to the community around it. And so those trees do have a measure of protection within the ordinance. If it's a heritage tree, 36 inches and larger, those trees will require approval for removal. But again, only, there's trees, part of the tree inventory, which will identify all of these trees. Part of the tree inventory is to determine the species, size, and condition of the tree. So that's a long answer to a short question, but I wanted to try and be thorough there.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And if you could share with us how a tree diameter is determined?
So tree diameter, commonly known in the industry as DBH, which is an acronym for diameter at breast height. So that is diameter as measured 4.5 feet off ground. And so that is where you measure the diameter of the tree, and it's, just measure the diameter, which, we traditionally do with a tape that wraps around the exterior of the tree, and then uses the circumference there to calculate diameter. But that is how a tree is typically measured / sized, using the diameter taken at 4.5 feet above ground.
Well, thank you. Another question says, hi, it sounds like this will protect more trees in commercial areas that we do now. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. So the current ordinance does not protect anything in commercial areas as it relates to trees. So yes, this will protect more. This will protect, I think, commercial areas. The proposed ordinance have a 10% tree save requirement, of which I think 5% would be mandated to be using existing trees on site, and then the other 5%, so half would have to be on site, and half could be some of the off-site methods. But yes, it will protect more in commercial areas.
Great. Let's see. Another question is, are trees protected during construction?
Are trees protected during construction? Yes, trees are indeed protected during construction. There are specific stipulations within the ordinance laying out providing guidance and laying out what the developer needs to do to protect those trees. And those trees are protected via physical barriers, so fencing and signage saying stay out of the fencing. And the placement of that physical barrier is based on industry best practices, which have determined, a critical area around the tree, which is required to be undisturbed for the tree to survive. So the tree protection measures are based on industry best practices, which are based on science in order to promote tree survivability. And then additionally, there is a tree protection plan element in that of the proposed ordinance, and that tree protection plan will have delineated on it where the tree save areas are and where the tree protection measures, so the fencing and the signage, will be located around those tree save areas. And so the planning department will have what they need in front of them in order to verify compliance with the provisions of the ordinance.
Well, thank you. It looks like we have time for maybe 2 more questions. This one is very interesting. It says, do trees benefit honeybees? With their numbers dwindling, I think we should consider more ordinances to protect them in even more situations.
So the short answer is yes. Trees do benefit honeybees. Trees can produce flowers, and honeybees you forage flowers, and the flowers provide the pollen and nectar that bees use for food and to make honey. Maples in particular are known for being a good food source for pollinators. Maples are a deciduous tree. Maples are going to be one of the trees covered under the ordinance. And so this ordinance does lend itself towards benefiting honeybees. And I agree that we should collectively, society, ensure the survival and proliferation of the honeybees. They play a crucial role in the ecosystem.
I agree. Well, the last question is, it appeared in the new ordinance, besides the tiered percentage of tree save area, that there are opportunities for off-site mitigation. Is there a maximum? So the question is there a maximum off-site mitigation for the tree save area?
Yes, there is. And the amount of tree save that can be accounted for using off-site methods is again tied to the type of development. So the single-family residential must account for all of their tree save on-site. And then the 2 middle tiers, so mixed use, multifamily, and general commercial industrial, can use off-site methods to account for up to 1/2 of their required tree save. So yes, there is a maximum there. And in the historic downtown area and Main Street, where space is so constrained and there might be physically impossible to do on-site tree save, then they are allowed to use their full 5% in off-site mitigation.
Well, thank you, Joe. So I want to close the public comment and question period for tonight's presentation. I want to thank everyone that has tuned in to tonight's presentation. We ask that you share with your neighbors, friends, and family that this recording will be available for viewing on the city's YouTube station, and the public comment period
will remain open until 5 p.m. on September 2nd. We, again, thank you for tuning in, and we appreciate your partnership in preserving and expanding the city's tree canopy. Good evening.